Stephen Kerr, Brexit negotiations were supposed to be wrapped up this week at Wednesday's summit. Do you accept that there's no sign of this happening now?
I think what we heard today from the Prime Minister, as we've been hearing from government sources here in London and also from the Commission in Brussels, are very positive messages. I think it was optimistic always to believe that these negotiations wouldn't go down to the wire. That's the way things are done in the European Commission's timetable.
But Stephen Kerr, if there's to be a breakthrough on the issue of the Irish backstop, and really Ireland is the crux of this, isn't it? Either the UK government or the EU has got to give ground. So who's going to blink first?
Well, I think the UK government have made their position very clear and repeatedly so. I think it's clear to everybody that this is about politics. And I think at the end of the day, there will be compromise. And I hope that the Commission will be a party to that compromise. This is a time for adult heads to come into the room and to deal with this on a pragmatic basis. Both the UK and the EU need a good deal in terms of Brexit.
But what does that mean, Stephen Kerr? Who's going to blink first?
Well, I don't know who's going to blink first. I think that the Prime Minister's laid her cards very firmly on the table. She was in the Commons today for nearly 2 hours and she repeated the government's position. I think we're looking for the European Union to show some flexibility and some political will to bring this deal to a conclusion. OK,
Paul Sweeney, it looks like a standoff. Who do you think, the EU or the UK, will blink first?
Well, this has been a civil war in the Tory party, and what Theresa May is actually doing is pandering to two irreconcilable tribes within her own party over this Irish backstop issue, and that's where the impasse will lie. Sadly, there's just no meaningful way of actually resolving that issue in the absence of having a customs union, and that's what Labour has been proposing. And even we've seen developments in the last couple of days with Ruth Davidson and David Mundell both threatening to resign over the issue of a backstop that would involve customs checks in the Irish border. It's clear in the Irish Sea, it's clear that there's going to be a major schism happening in the Tory party, and that's why they're never going to be able to get a deal through Parliament relying on Tory MPs voting on it, because there's going to be a big rebellion one way or another. Theresa May is simply incapable of carrying the support of our party on this issue.
OK, Stephen Kerr, I will bring you back in a second, but Stephen Gethins, do you think the Irish border question can be resolved?
Well, look, I think Stephen Kerr was right when he said it's all about politics, but what he wasn't right about was it's got anything to do with the European Commission. This is all about internal Tory party politics. And what's been astonishing is that we had reports in the media elsewhere, and also we had reports that civil servants in the UK government thought that they had a deal. But what they hadn't reckoned upon was the fact that this is a government that's been hijacked by its hard right, by the Brexiteer extremists, and that makes things really, really difficult. So what the government needs to do is it's failed in its negotiation with its Tory extremists on this, and what it needs to try and do is talk to other parties. And Nicola Sturgeon was in London today setting out a compromise deal that we've been advocating from day one, and that's the least worst option, which is to stay in the single market and the customs union.
Stephen Kerr, I'll let you come back on that. I mean, Theresa May has no room for manoeuvre, has she?
Yes, she does. I mean, the
because
thing
it's
is
a split
that after
party.
look, after she gave her Mansion House speech, and before that, the Lancaster House speech, the Conservative Party was very united. The principles around which the Prime Minister set off on this Brexit journey,
she's boxed herself in.
Hang on a second.
The Conservative Party is united around. Now, what we're talking about now is how this is delivered, and I think it's quite wrong to say this is a matter for internally to the Conservative Party. The United Kingdom is negotiating with the European Commission, and it's going to take these two parties to come to an agreement, and that's what the Prime Minister needs the space and the time to do. And these are critical days. There's no question of that. And we're coming very near to the point of agreement. And when there's a deal in the offing, that's always when the tension is the highest.
Paul Sweeney, all right. Put Stephen Gethins on you go.
No, I have to say, Rona, and Paul was in the chamber with me today as well. Tory MP after Tory MP piled in, having a right good go at the Prime Minister, to the extent that that it was absolutely astonishing how little support the Prime Minister has on her own side. I've no idea what Stephen was listening to today, but the amount of the attacks on the Prime Minister that were going on in the Tory benches today show the depth of this Tory civil war. And that's what it is. It's a Tory civil war, but the problem is the rest of us are being taken down with it as well at the moment.
Well, I understand that Stephen, for political reasons, will want to spin that story, but the fact is, if you go back and watch the proceedings and read in the Hansard...
Hang on a second, Stephen Gethins.
John Redwood was at it today.
Hang on a second, Stephen Gethins.
There's
Kerr.
a lot of goodwill towards the Prime Minister. There is widespread agreement
the Tory
across
party.
Across the Conservative
nonsense.
Party and across Parliament. She has got an extremely difficult job. She's trying to do what's in the national interest, and
She's
I
made
think
it
she
more
deserves
difficult
our
for
support
herself.
to bring.
But
she
Paul Sweeney,
deserves-
Theresa May's got a difficult job and she has got support.
No, she's
Yes,
made it
she
more
does.
difficult for herself unnecessarily. She refused to cooperate across parties from the outset of this. It's been a
That is
high-handed
not true.
approach to negotiations, and
That is
she's
not
ruled
true.
out of hand any approach to having a customs union, which is what Labour's consistent approach has been. And if she had actually held up her own tests about maintaining the exact same benefits of the single market and the customs union, she would have accepted that the only way to break this impasse is to deal with a customs union. That would solve the Irish border question, and that's where she's coming unstuck. And that is the major issue we're concerned with an Irish backstop. And I think it was rather foolish of Nicola Sturgeon, frankly, to come out and say that she wanted a differential arrangement for Scotland if Ireland was going to get one as well, the Northern Ireland was going to get one as
actually,
well. I think
Paul,
that's very
there's not going to
premature
be.
to make that claim.
What,
Paul, if
what's
you'd
wrong with the
listened to it,
customs
she
union
actually
for the
said
whole
for
of
the
the
whole
UK
of the
then,
UK.
Stephen
If you'd listened to the
Gethins?
Well,
speech.
Was that Stephen Gethins or Stephen Kerr?
Yeah, Paul, she was quite clear that this could be staying in the single market and the customs union for the whole of the UK. Now, Paul, do you agree with that? Because that's, as we know, that's the best way to avoid the hard Brexit that's on the table, and it's the least worst option from the UK government's
the worst
own
option.
option.
Hang on
I think
one
we've had
second.
four
How
different
can the
arrangements
single
from the
market be the worst
SNP.
option?
I think we've had four different propositions from the
Stephen-
SNP what we would have.
No, you've not. You've had
Stephen
one.
Kerr, what's wrong with the customs union?
Well, staying in the customs union indefinitely means that we are in the worst possible situation, that we're neither in nor out. We will be subject to the customs arrangements, the machinations of the European Commission. They will negotiate Britain's trade position. No, we have to leave the customs union in order to realise the benefits of leaving the European Union. And those benefits will come as we act as an independent trading nation, striking our own trade deals around the world. If you keep us in the customs union, you deny us that opportunity. And by the way, the Labour Party at one time, that was very much their policy. Paul Sweeney may want to contemplate that. I mean, the point
And
is
how do
that...
you deal with the issue of frictionless trade, Stephen? It's simply not going to happen
Okay,
in
but
the
Paul
timescale
Sweeney-
required, and you're going to have mass
Okay,
industrial
Paul-
You do
closures
it
as a
through free
result of
trade
that.
All right,
agreements.
okay.
You do
Paul
it through
Sweeney,
free trade agreements.
Paul
which
Sweeney,
is
there's
not
no
viable.
particular flavour of Brexit can command a majority in the House of Commons. So, where do we go from here?
Well, that's why we've said if this deal is voted down, which in all likelihood it will be given the current trajectory, which is failing rapidly, then Labour will be voting against the deal.
And does this
if that
increase the
fails to
chances of
command
a no
majority
deal
of the
then,
House
or
of
a
Commons-
people's vote?
Well,
we'll be calling for a general election at that point. We say that if Theresa May has lost the confidence of the House of Commons on the issue of Brexit, it's a critical issue. It's only right that she returns to the country in a general election. That's what we'll be calling for at that point.
Okay, Stephen Gethins,
Ro-
Nicola
Ro-
Sturgeon. Hang on a second, Stephen Gethins.
Yeah.
Nicola Sturgeon says MPs should vote down a Theresa May Brexit deal in order to get a better deal, a softer Brexit. But I mean, how does that happen? Who's going to negotiate that?
Well, from day one, we've been saying that the best option has been single market and the customs union. We said that the day after, so I'm not sure where Paul's getting his facts from. He's clearly not been listening. Now,
Well, you've
there
been
is a
talking about
majority
Scotland
across
being
the
in the
House.
Hang on a
Even
second,
Ruth
please.
Davidson,
Hang on.
even Ruth Davidson, after the EU referendum, argued in favour of staying in the single market. So we could have a majority in favour of staying in the single market and the customs union. That was a compromise that the Scottish Government came up with, actually involving members of the Labour Party and involving members of other parties and other expertise. That's a compromise, and that's what we need. It's not the best option, that's staying in the EU, but it is the least worst option, and it's one that could command a majority across the House if Ruth Davidson kept to her word, and if Scottish Labour, people like Kezia Dugdale and others who have argued for this too, kept to their word.
Time for a compromise, Stephen Kerr?
Look, I don't know how Paul can say the things he does about the Labour Party's position on this. They stood on a manifesto commitment to leave the single market and the customs union, and that is the reality. The reality is that if we stay in the customs union and the single market, we might as well have not left. Now, the British people have voted. They have voted to leave. And that means that we leave the customs union, and it means we leave the single market, and it means
sorry, I
that we
didn't see the customs
exercise
union
the
on the back.
maximum...
Okay.
Okay,
Stephen.
brief final word to Paul Sweeney. On you go, Paul.
Well, the reality is there's 6 tests that we've had consistently throughout this process, and number 1 is to maintain exact same benefits of the single market and the customs union. And that's why we are firmly in the view that
Impossible
the only
tests.
viable way to solve this is to maintain a customs union through this process. And if we can't
And
get
Paul's
that,
going to vote
Okay, hang
against
on,
any
Stephen
deal
Kerr.
Theresa May is
regardless
going
of
to come
what it
unstuck
is.
and come
Okay.
unstuck very rapidly.
Okay, we will have to leave it there. Just when we thought Brexit couldn't get any more complicated. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.